to another episode of the Visionary Building podcast and YouTube series. We're so excited to be here. I'm joined today by an analyst at Scotiabank's, Kristina Zheng. She's going to help us today cover our financial area of life, sort of what she's learned in her career so far and what advice she might have for the younger generation in terms of getting started. I would like to start with the question that I start with every guest. Celeste covers visionary building, sort of helping people find their career path and stay motivated. I'd love to sort of start with the question of what visionary building means to you and what a visionary means to you specifically.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think being a visionary to me is just like it's a very personal definition and it varies from person to person. I think being a visionary is kind of choosing a path where you find a lot of fulfillment in, and when you enjoy that specific career path for you, I feel like it continuously motivates you to improve yourself and excel in that discipline. So I think being a visionary is kind of gaining excellence in the path you choose, and that choice is something that is very personal and should be really empowering. And so yeah, currently in the process of building my own, I would say, and as an early, in my early 20s, as a 24-year-old, I think that path is always changing, and that's kind of what's exciting about like being so early on in your career.
That's fantastic. And you have a lot of experience working in the field that you're in right now. I'd
Mhm.
love to sort of hear about what you have learned so far about the economy, about finances, and what you're going to take away from your experiences right now.
Yeah. Well, there's like two sides. Like I obviously work in finance, but I also am like a 24-year-old, navigating her own, personal savings path, dealing with my own personal finances. I currently live in New York City, and rent here is really high, and it's, a lot of management and budgeting that goes into kind of making sure that like my rent is paid and like everything is handled, and also making sure that I'm saving for the future. And so I think that that's something that is easy to forget when you're young because you're so focused on getting started with your career. So I would say definitely discipline and having like people around you that are also practicing the same sorts of financial savings behaviors is really helpful. I would also say like early on in my career, like I for sure didn't know what I was gonna do. I wasn't expecting to land in finance either. I didn't know too much about the field, but I quickly learned kind of that with any job, like all jobs are quite learnable, and I was interested in developing and being in like in the presence of other people that were very highly motivated. And finance has a lot of people like that, and the work hours are a lot, so you get a lot of people that really put their all into working. So that's kind of like the two sides. Happy to like answer questions on both sides of this.
For sure. So starting with the experience that you mentioned firsthand,
Mhm.
24-year-old living in New York, I know that
Mhm.
with a lot being from New York, I know that comes with a lot of challenges. So
Mhm.
I'd love to sort of hear about what you've learned sort of about budgeting and things like that. Like you said, you're not an expert, but you are experiencing it first.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of love to hear more about that.
Yeah. I wanted to first preface, like, definitely, I'm not trying to provide any financial advice here. I'm still learning, but I would say that, like, common budgeting methods that you see, like, on the internet sometimes aren't directly applicable to each of our individual lives. So even I, as someone living in New York versus someone living like in California or in Texas or in Florida, they're all going to have like different ways to approach personal savings and finance and their own finances. So definitely choose something that is like very specific and molded to your own life. Secondly, I wanted to touch on the fact that like it's good to have some guidelines of like how much you're planning on putting aside for savings or how much you're intended on dedicating to your retirement, stuff like that. I would say like recently I've been taking more time to learn about that a little bit more. So while I do work in finance, I'm familiar with kind of the retirement accounts and kind of the financial products that are associated with um, you know later life. type of finances, I would say that it's good to get feedback from other people. So whether that be like calling your 401k company and asking them about like various methods of investing, whether you have money in your IRA, or if you move jobs and like your old 401k isn't applicable, it's important to know where your money is and kind of keep a record of that. And then also I would say like even setting aside like a percentage goal of how much each paycheck is dedicated to savings is really, really important. It doesn't have to be like super high. Like if you live in a city like where I live in, there's a lot of people that don't put any money aside in savings. So any percentage, I would say, as a young adult is good, financial savings behavior. And it's all about building kind of that discipline. And then you can work your way up to kind of the goal percentage that you're working for toward savings. And so that's on like the savings front. I would say on the budgeting front, I would say you should definitely budget for what you want to enjoy in life. So if you really enjoy vacations, definitely budget for vacations, but know like some other parts of your life may need to compromise to kind of fit that mold of life you want to live. I personally am not like a big traveler, at least at my current point in time, but I do love like shopping. I do love, looking at clothes and buying like nice clothes for myself. And so that is something I prioritize, and I make sure I budget and save for the times I want to, buy those clothes or buy, nice things for myself. And so again, it's all individual, but as long as you have like a structure, whether that be an Excel spreadsheet, whether that be people around you keeping you accountable, these are all really great ways to kind of set up a really holistic and personal financial budgeting plan for yourself. Yeah.
That's all really great advice. Definitely, I was taking notes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So, for someone like me who doesn't understand the world of finance and doesn't really have a knowledge of sort of what goes into a role like yours, can you kind
Mm-hmm.
of describe what a day to day looks like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's pretty busy and sometimes it varies like month per month. And one thing I've learned to really appreciate coming into finance is that like the role of the economy and the markets, it's always a topic of conversation. We track it every single day. And so we know what's happening, even if, day by day, the changes may not be that much. It's something that affects kind of what happens with our clients. It affects like the business gain for us as a bank. And so my day to day is maybe not necessarily tracking that, but paying attention to those things and using that information to like inform my own decisions and aid my own analysis on our clients specific to the bank. I currently work more on the lending side. So I work more on the corporate banking side of Scotiabank, which focuses on lending, kind of like, a regular client like you and I who wants to go into, a bank and, obtain a loan or obtain a mortgage. We focus on that lending side to like corporations and big institutional clients. And so that as a result requires a lot of like analysis on whether that is like a worthy borrower in our eyes. So like think of like credit scores. That's like similar analysis that we're conducting on like big companies. And that is, a big driver of what we do as a bank. And so my day-to-day is a lot of, analyzing clients like that. And whether that be in Excel or using other like resources out there that the bank has for us, like Bloomberg, for example. We're spending kind of our day to day doing that. So a lot of meetings, and then sometimes if it's not a heavy meeting day, we're kind of just at our desk making sure we're producing documentation on these clients. And so that's kind of how I would describe it. Obviously, sometimes it seems pretty esoteric what I'm talking about, but again, it's just a lot of, if you wanted to break it down, we're in spreadsheets a lot and we're in Word, so using a lot of Microsoft Office in general, or we're making PowerPoints to illustrate pitch decks, for example, to gain business for potential clients. So that's kind of my day to day. Some days it's slow, some days it's not, depending on the market, how good the economy is, you know, makes us more busy as well.
It sounds pretty stressful, especially because the economy is always changing and things like
Mhm.
that. You mentioned earlier it's kind of rigorous work at times. I'd love to sort of hear about how you get into the mindset to stay motivated.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely something like, since I'm still exploring career paths for myself and I love like the day-to-day of finance, but I would love to apply what I've learned in finance maybe, in other contexts as well. I just think it's like a very applicable field everywhere. I think how I stay motivated is kind of, varies day by day. I think whether that be thinking about my greater purpose and how I would use this knowledge not just in my job, but like in my personal life or in future potential like career roles. I like to like think of it like that. I also like to stay motivated by trying my best to maintain some sort of like work-life balance. And so whether that be like having a good weekend and going out with friends when I do have time, or like just taking care of myself, I think it's really, really important when you're, working all the time to have some time to like, not look at your phone, not look at your computer and stuff like that. So yeah, it varies day by day, but definitely like self-care is very important. And then I'm also just learning this now, like setting boundaries for yourself at work and knowing when you're at capacity and understanding that for yourself is really important. Because I think as young adults, we're very eager to like gain experience and we're very eager um to prove ourselves, but sometimes you realize that you are working way too hard and you need to kind of put it to a level where you can meet expectations and also improve. Because if you're tired, like it's not helping anybody, it's not helping yourself. Like you definitely need to take care of yourself.
That's amazing. And I hear you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard you
Mhm.
also do hip hop. Is that right?
Yeah, I dance on the side. I don't dance as much anymore, but it's great because New York is like the birthplace of hip hop. So there's a lot of history, a lot of culture here, and I spend a lot of my time outside of work doing that.
What would you tell a 24-year-old or someone your age or younger to sort of how would you stress the importance of sort of really setting yourself up financially and just sort of having a plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it's a constant battle every single day to figure out like the safe route. I would say like the safe route and also the route that maybe you are leaning toward that may not be as financially stable. Some people are really satisfied with like really stable career paths, but then there's also like the group of people that may want something more risky, and those are both like really tough choices. I think 24 or younger, they're all experiencing college, especially. I would say like as a college student, like definitely spend a lot of time exploring what you want to do. And, once you figure that out, like making that plan of like how you will accomplish it will make it so much easier. So whether you wanted to pick up a more stable career or like work a part-time job in college or in your early 20s to make that dream work, like that is definitely like a super valid way to approach your early 20s. For those people who choose like really stable career paths, like a lot of people spend a lot of time recruiting in college or even now recruiting to make that work. I think navigating that is like definitely depends on the person, but I would say first figuring out like where your end goal is and then kind of charting a path there, whether that be financially, whether that be like personally, like how you're going to develop yourself personally to get there. I think that that is super important. So again, all the things I mentioned earlier about like budgeting or like talking to people who've been maybe in your shoes, maybe they're like two steps ahead, not like super far ahead where they can't really relate to your situation. I think it's super helpful to talk to people who may have been in your shoes and just got out of it and are moving on to the next step. Those are the people that are really going to help you establish kind of your own personal finance discipline, as well as just career in general, like how you will navigate it. So yeah, be very intentional with the people you seek out, and networking is also very important. Yeah.
That's great advice. Really, really
Yeah.
good advice. And then you mentioned I would love to hear more about the challenges that kind of came with coming from Texas to New York, uh,
Mhm.
and then just in your industry in general, some sort of hurdles that you've had to overcome.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's like a lot to unpack in terms of because I've been in the East Coast for I think now 6 years. So I came to New York 18 years old. I came from Houston, which, if anyone knows Houston, like there's obviously like a very developed suburbia, and I came from that suburbia. And so I came to New York very wide-eyed, didn't really know too much about the city life. Texas, like everyone drives cars, everything is super far apart. It's also really hot. We have like 2 seasons max in Texas. But coming here was a big change. I think the main hurdles I dealt with was I was really, really homesick, and I had a lot of trouble establishing myself and my identity in New York, which I think is a very common thing when any person moves to a really big city, is like they're trying to figure out their friend group, they're trying to figure out the activities that they're going to define themselves by. And I think for me, another additional hurdle is like I just missed home. I just wanted to eat like Chinese food every single day. Like I didn't acclimate super well to the college dorms initially, but I learned, and I also was able to establish a lot of independence for myself because New York is really that city where you're like kind of forced to do that. It's just a lot all the time. And I also like it helped because I made a lot of friends based in the city going to NYU. In NYU, since it's not like a school campus, you get to meet people that aren't just from your school. They're like based in New York, they go to other city colleges, stuff like that. It's just a really cool environment to be in. And I got to experience like a lot of the fun things to do as a student at NYU. I also didn't, I majored in international relations and economics. And so it wasn't directly applicable to finance, I would say. Um, and so whenever I entered the field of finance, I actually was making a career transition from tech into finance. And so I started off in like a um, like pretty product oriented space, working with insurance products. And then I moved into finance. And this is just like pure finance. So dealing with corporate and investment banking type of products. And so that learning curve was super hard for me in the beginning, but I kind of prided myself in like being able to pick it up really quickly, doing a lot of self-learning on my own. And I think the big obstacles you run into when you're early in a career is like dealing with imposter syndrome and not feeling like you're supposed to be there. And so I would say it's still a thing that never like doesn't always go away. I don't want to sound too discouraging. It doesn't it goes away. I think it's just you get better at dealing with it as you advance in your career and you gain more experience and your confidence grows. And so I think just like trusting yourself a lot is what kind of is a solution to overcoming those hurdles. So whether that be doing the same task again and again till you're really confident in the ins and outs of it, like that is where you gain your confidence and you're able to move forward. And so, yeah, that's kind of the obstacles I faced both as like a college student moving from Texas to New York, and then also moving from like non-finance to finance as like a non-finance major. Yeah.
That's great. And then we kind of covered a lot of the area of life of finance, but it sounds
Mhm.
like in your life you've had a lot of transitions. So you've
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of moving around and things like that. Another
Mhm.
area of life we cover is mindset. And that
Mhm.
we talked a little bit about that already, but I'd sort of love to hear how you get into the mindset to make a transition, to take a leap and a risk like you've had so many times before.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely if you're in the environment where it encourages you to take risks, I think that's really, really helpful. I would also say my environment was weird because I graduated like during COVID. I graduated 2021. So not directly in COVID, but COVID very much was a big theme throughout my whole senior year. It affected my recruiting. And so it kind of, my game plan kind of just like went out the window. And I think that that's going to be something every 20 something year old experiences is like you have this game plan that you were planning on doing. And then something happens and all of a sudden you have to rewrite the game plan again. I would say my mindset was mostly like, you know, a combination of like figuring out what I want, but then also like maybe taking from what other people are doing. And I think that that's a very interesting mix where, you know, it's good to kind of gain influence from your friends and figuring out what they're doing with their lives and using that as like a blueprint for how you're going to approach your life. I thought that for me, you know, I didn't really resonate too much with the tech sector as a whole. And so I wanted to explore a completely different industry. And I'm just like a naturally curious person and I'm always learning about new things on the side. And so I thought, you know, I'm like an economics major. I could just like move over to finance. It's pretty like it can transition pretty seamlessly. And so that's what I did. And I'm just really glad that like I know so much more than I could have known if I just stayed in the same industry. And I think that that's like the biggest blessing moving and transitioning can do to you. Obviously, it's really, really time consuming and a lot of energy gets put into it. But as somebody that's always been very interested in figuring what I want to do myself, like very just taking the self initiative to do it, I think like I tend to find myself in situations where I'm like, okay, well, it's now time to move and I would like to figure out what I do next. And so yeah, definitely whether you're in an environment where risk taking is encouraged or the the environment itself like forces you to take risks, I think that those are both like blessings in disguises. And not and because we're so young, I think it's good to like go for it, you know, go for it now instead of later, where when like maybe the risks are a little higher and like the stakes are a little higher, you know.
That's so true. As someone who's made a lot of
Yeah.
transitions as well in my 20s, I totally agree with everything you're saying. So I love to end with these kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to sort of hear where you would see yours or where you would like to see yourself in about 10 years time, financially, professionally,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, and just, you know, mentally.
Yeah, that's like I think I can touch on maybe like emotionally and maybe financially because I think I'm still figuring out my career right now. I can share maybe my my like early on like you know ambitions on what I want to do with my career, but I think you know when I hit my 30s, my mid 30s, like I would really like to be in a place where like I am 100% confident and established within like my career. And so that may be in like a totally different industry. That might be, you know, personally, like I feel very, you know, steady. I think that that's like an important feeling to have. And I think rather than chase like a job title or like an income, like a dollar sign, I think like being in a mental state where you feel very like confident and very bold because you're so established in your career. I think that's something that I really strive for. I think emotionally like that it touches on that, but I also see myself career wise maybe like doing a career where I can travel more. I am really really in touch with like my heritage, and I think part of it was because I was able to study abroad in Shanghai, which is like the longest time I've ever spent in China, and I would love to do something related to traveling, whether that be like spending my time here and then traveling to Shanghai and doing stuff there. Something maybe related to my interests. And so since Shanghai is like also a finance capital, it's like directly applicable, but there's also like a lot of really cool things out there. Like there's like a lot of things in fashion, there's a lot of things in gaming, there's a lot of things in entrepreneurship. So like exploring those opportunities right now in like the safety of like America is like very, very much my number one priority in figuring out what that is. And maybe building up to a point where I can travel more for my work. I think that would be a really cool thing to do, and maybe live somewhere for an extended period of time. So those are kind of things that I want to like accomplish in the next 10 years. And you know maybe a job also that like gives me more work-life balance, I think, because I think right now I definitely am approaching work as like a, well, you can work really really hard now, but maybe later on like I would like to have more time to like you know give myself some leisure and then also spend some time on myself, because I think self-care is definitely a priority for me. even in my early 20s, but I feel like it'll grow more so when I'm in like 30s, you know?
Well, I can tell you're definitely on the right track. So
Yeah.
you're killing it. So that's amazing. Kristina, thank you so much for joining me today and speaking with me. I can't wait for more people to hear this. And then in general, if you're interested in exploring more areas of life, be sure to check out Celeste Gehring's website, visionarybuilders.com. Again, thank you so much for joining me, Kristina. It was great meeting you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.